This is a very important hearing today, and I want to thank all of our witnesses who have taken the time out of their schedules to testify, including Lieutenant Ken Bitsko, who is traveled here from Nevada. I also want to thank all the men and women who work very hard 24/7 every day of the year to secure our borders. Those who work at our nation's air, land, and seaport, those who are on foreign postings, those who work in our nation's interior, whether in uniform or plain clothes, whether they are from ICE, CBP, DEA, or other federal, state, or local agencies. They all deserve sincere appreciation for doing a very tough job and doing it very well. Some of these officers have made the ultimate sacrifice. From decades past, we recall the service of DEA Special Agent Enrique Quique Camarena. In recent years, we mourn the loss of Border Patrol agents Robert Rosas and Brian Terry, and now in just the past few months, we suffered the loss, as the chairman said, of ICE Special Agent Jaime Zapata. All serve their nation well, and we can best honor them by taking up their fallen standard and continuing and ultimately finishing their work by securing our borders. We will discuss today various tactics used by the drug and alien smugglers to achieve their goals, from disguising illegal aliens as U.S. Marines in uniform and traveling in vehicles masquerading as official U.S. government transports, to using submarines and small boats to haul dope up our coast, to crafting elaborate tunnels, as has been mentioned, underneath our borders that bring in illegal aliens, dangerous narcotics, and other contraband into our country. The drug and alien smugglers will literally stop at nothing. The situation at our southern border is, without a doubt, very critical to our current and our future security. According to the National Drug Intelligence Center, in its 2010 study, the calendar year 2009 saw an increase in the availability of heroin, methamphetamines, and marijuana smuggled over our southern border. The insidious reach of the Mexican drug trafficking organizations across our southern border and into our communities is not limited strictly to the border area, though, through which they peddle their drugs with deadly results. Again, according to the NDIC, Mexican drug cartels are the only DTOs active in every region of the United States, including the states of every member of this subcommittee. These drug cartels' reach has even arrived here in our nation's capital. The Washington Post reported recently that the D.C. Metro Police and special agents from ICE Homeland Security investigations arrested 8 suspects believed to be connected with Mexico's La Familia drug cartel, whose objective was to expand their operations in the district and the surrounding area. This multi-city investigation netted over $5 million worth of crystal meth alone. And just as ominous, the Mexican drug cartels, according to reports, have expanded their relationship with street and prison gangs in the United States and have increased their distribution of illegal drugs into more rural and suburban areas. This drug trade has brought enormous revenues to these cartels. Tens of billions of dollars are smuggled from the United States throughout the southwest border into Mexico. This blood money helps the cartels tempt some of our officers on the border to forsake their oaths to uphold the law for private gain. We know, however, that these dirty few are just a small microcosm of the total workforce, and the vast majority are truly the rule to the exception. The end result is that innocent people have gotten caught up in the violence. The Mexican government reported recently that over 34,000 people have been killed in their country in drug war-related deaths since 2007, considering that last year's total of 15,273 marked almost a 60% increase in the numbers. Unfortunately, those numbers are still going up. The violence has also occurred in our country. Drugs and alien smugglers have kidnapped innocent people to further their objectives, have emboldened street gangs to become more violent, thus placing more of our brave law enforcement officers and ourselves in greater danger. This is a battle that we must win. We must win it because the drugs and the violence threaten individuals and communities across our nation. We must win it because we need secure borders to ensure our national security. And we must win it on behalf of those who already have made the ultimate sacrifice in this fight. Again, I want to thank our witnesses and you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing. I have a few questions. Well, actually, I have a lot of questions, but some of them we'll submit for the record because of the limited time today. But just to address the corruption problem, even though it may be limited, obviously that's something that has to be addressed so that it doesn't spread. And I know that there have been cases where, you know, the one woman who was found to be corrupt, hanging out the bars with the drug dealers and things like that. Can you describe, basically, for any of your organizations, the methods that you use to try to detect, you know, whether there's potential corruption, whether an officer's being corrupted, and the preventative techniques? I know it's impossible to eliminate it completely. We're talking about a lot of money here, and the potential, you know, is always going to be there. But can you just describe some of the things that you look for? And we can just start and go down the table.
On behalf of CBP, when we have insight into the corruption cases, because DHS IG really is the lead on that, for us it is trying to figure out all the method, manners, and means, and then instill for training. Fortunately, also for CBP, because we have technology using many different types of readers when people are coming through the entry, we can take a look and go back looking at the technology to figure out who is in what lane and when and how, and sometimes when there's been detection of drugs in a vehicle or something, we can go back and figure out who was on the line at that time. So a lot of it's training. One of the challenges that we have is that we are not necessarily always aware of the number of corruption investigations because, as I said, it is usually led by DHS, Inspector General, and with a partnership at times with ICE.
You know, at ICE, there's in the hiring process, one thing is that we hire a lot of our special agents because the requirements, they're coming from other law enforcement agencies, so they generally actually even have a proven track record, so we're bringing them on after they've already had one background investigation. Now they're getting a second check and balance as well, and if they've had any administrative issues with their previous agency, we can actually, you know, remove them from the process. But in addition to that, while you're on the job, I still am amazed that we have over a 20-year-old case management system, TEX. But that case management system, every time you key a stroke into the system, it's recorded. So if you were to run my name, for example, it's going to be recorded, and those things get audited regularly. So that actually can tell you if somebody's actually searching outside of their lane where they shouldn't be looking for cartels to see if somebody's under investigation and so forth. As well as a good, healthy organization to make sure that people don't realize that it's not tolerated at all is by having good checks and balances in your system just on everyday administrative things. You know, ensuring that there are repercussions for the small things that might seem to be a technical administrative violation, but in fact that can perpetuates itself into an environment where people feel that it's okay to violate the rules. So it's really by having a whole complete approach to integrity.
Just very quickly, getting back to the subs issue, is this something that when we get to the fully submersibles, is this something that is going to take the Navy being involved with as well?
Sir, yes, and as Donna had mentioned earlier, we work very closely with the Department of Defense. For DEA, it's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for Counter-Narcotics, but GIATF South is very much involved. Southcom is very much involved. Yes, we work extraordinarily closely with them, and also our foreign counterparts, the Colombian Navy primarily, the Ecuadorian Navy as well.
Okay, and then briefly getting back to the the ultralights and some of these more remote areas. I'm very familiar with I like to call them remotely piloted vehicles instead of the drones, but because they actually have a human flying them, and they do a lot of those actually out of my my home state up at Creech Air Force Base. But is that some of the technology? More of that is needed with even the wider camera angles and the more sophistication that they are developing all the time with that flying higher, being able to see more, see at night, the whole thing like that. Is that more the technology you're talking about?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Those are invaluable to us for a whole host of reasons.
Okay. If we could maybe just try to take a larger view. We know, as all the testimony, the reports that we get, they are getting more and more sophisticated. They are, you know, they're kind of like the terror. They are very much like the terrorist organizations. We do one thing, they adjust to it. They're going to constantly adjust. But the bigger picture item is that do we have the resources? Are we putting the kind of resources that we need to protect our country from drugs, from, you know, other types of illicit activities that could come across our borders, especially obviously the southwest border. By the way, I want to I've been down there, and it's extraordinary what you all are doing. It really is. The professionalism, you know, many years ago it was not looked at that way, but the law enforcement professionalism now on the border is really extraordinary. But the other side of the border is continuing to get worse and worse. The violence, obviously, we hear about, is getting worse and worse. And there's a great deal, because the money's getting larger and larger. We have a, you know, obviously demand problem on this side. I think the Mexican government's exactly right that we need to do a lot more about the demand problem. I've actually encouraged the president in his State of the Union address. I wish that actually he would address that, basically, that if you're using drugs in the United States, kind of sending that message from the White House that if you're using drugs in the United States, that you're hurting our national security, that you're funding, you know, these incredibly violent drug cartels as well as other, you know, terrorists around the world. But looking at the big picture, do we have the kind of resources that we need, and what more, you know, can Congress do? You know, do we need the military down there, the National Guard or whatever? Do we need, you know, more, you know, agents in the various departments? Do we need more technology? Is it more of the fence? Is it more, you know, obviously we you know, between submarines, between tunnels, between everything that you have huge challenges. So taking a more of a 30,000-foot picture here, can you kind of describe, and I just want kind of each one of your perspective on that.
Well, technology is always needed, but trying to figure out what kind of technology, as you said, they change all the time. The tunnel technology has been helpful, but still you can't use something just separately. We need to have intelligence in using that. The submersibles and the semi-submersibles. A semi-submersible you could probably find, especially if you're up in the air, because they have to float at some point. But the fully submersibles, that's a whole different realm in the technology field. It is a challenge. I think that one of the, as Tom Harrington said and Mr. Dinkins, we really do rely and work very hard with our partners down south. That is integral. And actually with all of our military. I mean, I just yesterday spent some time with JADF North and our people that are down there, and they're down at EPIC, and they're helping with us. Not that the DoD solution is the solution, but frankly, we can leverage some of the skill sets that they have. For us, some of the topography in Arizona is much like Afghanistan, so we can look to our DoD partners to find out what technologies they're using that could be helpful for us. So it really is trying to identify what technologies are out there and then communicate with our partners to try to leverage the best technologies that are out there.
Yeah, and that is, we really, I think, then both of you have actually recognized the fact that this is not just a border issue. We just can't, you know, put all of our resources on the border and expect that that's going to be the problem solver. We really have to look at where the root of the problem is, and as Mr. Harrigan mentioned with DEA is, for example, in narcotics, the source of the narcotics can be as far away as Colombia, and we have to ensure that we're working to deal with those threats actually before they hit our border. But also, we also have to make sure that those organizations that are operating within our communities are actually being held accountable for their illegal actions, because that's where a significant amount of the proceeds are actually being generated from. And so there is always, I would say that, you know, we are at all high levels at ICE. I mean, we've grown substantially. We have a lot of resources. There's still room to grow as far as technology goes. There are overseas and deployment of overseas. It's not just, for example, if you can work in South and Central America at the pathways that are being exploited by alien smuggling organizations, bringing up the aliens. It's not just enough to wait for those aliens to hit our border either. If we can change policy, work with our federal law enforcement partners to actually interdict those individuals before they get into Mexico and before they land on our southwest border, we're going to be a lot better off. So as Mr. Harrigan mentioned, they have SIU units. At ICE, we refer to ours as the vetted units. We have 9 of those located throughout the world. they're indispensable because their priorities become the priorities of what the United States law enforcement priorities are. They're there to work for you, and you can trust them because they've been polygraphed, vetted, and background. So there's never enough technology, and I think that we need to continue to push our borders out.
Mr. Harrigan, also, when you address this, just very briefly, does any of the, like, heroin and things coming from Afghanistan, how does that enter into the United States as well?
Well, typically, sir, in Afghanistan, we see, despite Afghanistan being the most prolific producer of opium, produces over 90% of the world's opium, in the United States, we see less than 3% of the heroin seized here comes from Southwest Asia, comes from Afghanistan. Although, interestingly enough, our neighbors to the north in Canada, most of the heroin they're seizing right now, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, comes from Afghanistan. We have not seen it yet here in the United States, but the ones that we have seen, the seizures have been made, have been by couriers coming over, flights from originating in Southwest Asia, transiting through Europe, and then on to the United States, primarily the New York area, JFK. Relative to Mexico, sir, as Donna and Jim alluded to, technology obviously is a key. Every time it appears that we develop some sort of new technology to defeat something the traffickers have, they come up with something new. So again, technology is always key. But I think what we need to keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, is the continued developments of these SIU, these sensitive investigative units. And we can't lose sight of the fact, whenever we talk about Mexico or the southwest border, we need to keep Central America in the discussion as well, because there's unprecedented stress, in my opinion, by the government of Mexico right now on these cartels, by the United States, by the Colombians from south. So we're pushing these cartels, if you will, down south into Central America. So DEA is continuing to build up these SIUs, not only in Mexico. We have 11 offices right now in Mexico, but we also have an office in each of the Central America countries as well. We're establishing vetted units, and the next degree up from a vetted unit would be an SIU. And that's what we need to do to have, I believe, any significant impact on these cartels.
Ken Bitsko is a longtime resident of Las Vegas, executive director of the Nevada High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, longtime law enforcement veteran, 30 years with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, assigned to vice, narcotics training, and canine units, helped form the forerunner of HIDTA, HIDTA, and the Drug Interdiction Combined Enforcement Task Force, DICE. Served 4 years in the canine program, and as a matter of fact, Las Vegas Metro named their canine training facility after Ken. It's now called the Lieutenant Kent Bitsko Canine Training Facility. He retired. His retirement lasted all of 1 year, and then he joined HIDTA in 2007 as their executive director, and under his leadership, HIDTA has grown to 12 enforcement task forces and 4 administrative initiatives. So we welcome you, and thanks for being here.
Senator Pryor, Senator Ensign, I appreciate the opportunity to come and address this committee. My testimony is going to address a few cases that we've experienced in Nevada that outline the impact that the cartels have directly on especially southern Nevada. The first one got a lot of media attention in 2008. It was a Cole Puffenberger kidnapping. Cole Puffenberger was a 6-year-old boy who had the misfortune of having Mr. Tinnemeyer as his grandfather. Mr. Tinnemeyer was transporting cocaine for the Sinaloa drug cartel and decided on his 6th trip, transporting 250 kilos from the southwest border to the East Coast, that he would steal $4.5 million from the cartel. Well, the cartel contracted with a couple of local cell leaders in Nevada and kidnapped Cole to try and get his grandfather out of hiding and to recover the money that he had stolen from him. We were fortunate enough, working our HIDTA ISC with the Fusion Center, led to the recovery of Cole unharmed and the prosecution of the local cell head leaders. They weren't convicted of the kidnapping, but they were convicted of drug trafficking. Second case, we have some pictures, I believe, of a hidden compartment that was located in a trailer. It was a Sanchez case. Operatives from the local La Familia cell head met with undercover operatives at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Over the subsequent couple of weeks, there was several narcotics undercover buys that transpired. When they took down Mr. Sanchez and his associates, intelligence led to his stash house, which was located in the central western part of Las Vegas. When they hit this house with a search warrant, well, it was a trailer, and the trailer was worth about $15,000. And the compartment that they found located under the bed, kind of a basement built under the trailer, they inadvertently found the button that activated the bed coming up, opened up the compartment, found automatic weapons, a drug stash, and they spent $20,000 on the compartment in a trailer that wasn't worth $15,000. So it gives you an idea of the level of commitment that they have in hiding their narcotics and preventing both the police and their competitive drug trafficking organizations from getting to their stash. The third and fourth case that I want to talk a little bit about, it's a case that the Southern Nevada Drug Task Force, a part of HIDTA, has been working since 2007. This case started with a 1-ounce cocaine purchase from just a local Mexican national, didn't really know what they had. When they started running this person's name through all the databases that they had available to them, they discovered that he was very involved with the La Familia drug cartel. And over the following 2.5 years, this investigation has been going on. It has resulted in the recovery of $1.1 million in bulk cash, 42 kilos of cocaine, 150 kilos of methamphetamine, 42 search warrants seized, 114 different telephone intercepts, and 65 arrests. Dismantled several cartel cells across the nation. They worked with DEA's their intelligence division and participated in the dismantlement of cell heads in California and in points east also. This spun into the Menlo case, which was another La Familia cell in Nevada. This gentleman was using an 18-wheeler to pick up cocaine on the southwest border and transport it into Las Vegas, and then also many cities in the central and eastern part of the United States. At one point, phone recordings indicated that he was transporting $450,000 in bulk cash after making his drug deliveries. It went back to Las Vegas, and before they could react and get a search warrant at the house, he got it out of there, and it was taken back down to Mexico in the bulk cash. These cases are just a sampling of what we're dealing with in Southern Nevada and what law enforcement and the prosecutors are tasked with in Southern Nevada. Some of the things that the cartels are doing that are trying to thwart the efforts of law enforcement, they're using Skype, BlackBerry email accounts. They're posting email drafts to an email account, and then instead of transmitting them, they're giving that email access code to their co-conspirators where they can go in and get the message, trying to keep law enforcement from intercepting. The cartels, or the DTOs in Nevada, are also using Mexican cell services and their push-to-talk, and because these are based out of Mexico, the law enforcement can't get the subscriber information to go up on warrants and to go up on Title IIIs. Nevada HIDTA has had a significant impact on the law enforcement cooperation in Nevada, both Washoe County and Clark County. As Senator Ensign mentioned, we have 12 enforcement initiatives. This has not always been the case in Southern Nevada. When I was working narcotics, we would start a task force, and somebody would get mad at somebody else, and everybody would take their toys and go home. Well, with the advent of the HIDA and with those heads of agencies having to sit across the table every quarter with their federal counterparts and their state counterparts, anytime there's a difference, they've been able to work it out. So since 2001 and the advent of HIDA, we've had an extremely close working relationship with all the federal agencies, all the state and local agencies. It's been a great relationship, and we hope to see that continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and both of you, once again, thanks for coming from our states to come here and give us that perspective from local folks after the feds. And one of the things, as you know, Ken, I've toured the fusion centers and DEA and the FBI and the HIDA centers, and it really is remarkable. And everybody I keep talking to, the cooperation and coordination at all levels now is so much better than it used to be. It used to be so many of the turf battles. You know, this is our turf, don't step into it, and we're not going to, you know, it's like the feds were the enemy, or, you know, whatever. And that seems to have mostly gone away. I'm sure it still happens somewhat, but it seems to mostly have gone away because it, you know, it's such a critical issue. You're dealing with on the front lines, obviously, and seeing what's happening in the local communities. You know, one of the questions that I do get that I just always like to ask people who are on the front lines, you know, you get this question about legalizing marijuana, legalizing, you know, other types of drugs. I just like your personal opinion. You guys have been doing this for a long time. Just your personal opinion. One is on legalizing just marijuana. And then the other would be on legalizing other types of drugs, you know, because they say that if the argument goes this way, that if you legalize it, you take away the criminal aspect of it. But so I'm not trying to prejudice your answer or anything like that. I'm just saying what people who are for legalization say, and I just like your responses to it. Either one.
Having dealt with this for many, many years in my law enforcement career, having seen the impacts of narcotics in my family, I don't know anybody that decided on a Friday night that had never done drugs, you know, I think I'll go do some crack cocaine. Everybody starts with something. Whether it's marijuana or whether it's pharmaceuticals, they don't normally start doing heroin or cocaine or methamphetamine. So I think it's disingenuous for anybody to say that marijuana is not a gateway drug. Give you a little bit of an idea of the impact that marijuana is having on the local scene in Las Vegas. At the beginning of 2010, we had no dispensaries in Las Vegas. By October of 2010, we had 62 dispensaries, marijuana dispensaries in Las Vegas that were dispensing marijuana and marijuana edibles. The working in partnership with Las Vegas Metro, with the U.S. Attorney's Office and DEA, they served search warrants on 18 of those organizations. They seized over 300 pounds of finished product, and I don't remember the exact tonnage of edibles that they seized, but they seized a lot of edibles. They arrested 18 people on federal indictments. We've seen, and I believe it's direct relation to these dispensaries, the marijuana indoor grows are up by about 60% over the last 3 years. We're on pace in 2011 to do 200 indoor grows in southern Nevada. Now, northern Nevada doesn't have the problem with indoor grows because they're getting their marijuana from over the hill in central California. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police reported when I was preparing my annual report and threat assessment that they had 8 homicides in 2010 directly related to marijuana, including a 12-year-old girl that was killed in a home invasion. I think it was the uncle that was living in the house owed money to a DTO. They went over to collect at a home invasion, wound up killing a 12-year-old girl, and that was behind marijuana. So the effect that marijuana is having on our communities and on our children and the other segments it's almost indescribable. And it's the biggest cash crop. I mean, we talk about heroin and methamphetamine and cocaine, but there's a lot more money being made in Mexico from from marijuana than there is the other drugs.
So I would take that you would not be for me, guys. I'd
no.
just like to make one other comment on it. It's really amazing, you know, everybody made fun of Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign, but drug use during the 1980s really went down dramatically. That's one of the reasons I said in my opening statement, I've been trying to talk, or in my questioning of the federal panel, is been trying to talk, I tried to talk President Bush into it when he was president, tried to talk President Obama. I really do think, you know, the bully pulpit to use to talk to our youth. Unfortunately, when I speak to high schools all the time, kids today think marijuana is a joke. They do. When I get asked this question by young people, every single high school I go to speak to, I almost without fail, they always ask me, you know, how do you feel about legalizing marijuana? That's why I asked you the question today. And when somebody asks that question, all the kids laugh. You know, they do, because marijuana usage to most kids today is a joke, and it needs to become more serious because the effects are so devastating. And that's the reason that I mentioned it today. So I thank both of you for being here.